Hey everyone! This is going to be another one of those ones where I'm sighing a lot, I feel. Good lord. What a freaking week. Okay, I gotta say this one just outright, just immediately, I see a lot of people have showed up for this. This is cool, but huge content warning. We are going to be looking at some really just like violent, like genocidal rhetoric. And so, I mean, that's not great. And like, I just can't be like clear enough about this. If you think you won't handle it well, you have no obligation to watch. Nat and I will be playing some Resident Evil 6 after, and you are completely, come watch us fight Big Zombie or whatever. But yeah, just be aware of that. So I have some pals here to chat with me about what's been going on. Let's transition. Wait, where's my fucking... How do I unmute? Oh no, I've changed screens and I don't know where it is. Hey everyone! I found it.
Hi. We're here, hi.
I have with me here Katie Montgomery, Laura K. Buzz, Marina Dove, and Tia, who is not on camera but is very much here and very much lovely. So, right. I guess I'll just launch us right into it and say what's going on. So I already covered this on a previous stream. If you want to see me cry a bunch, there's the BBC published this article. We're being pressured into sex by some trans women by Caroline Lowbridge. Since then, so overview of what that is. It's what it sounds like. It's the BBC calling trans women rapists. By definition, it's really horrible and it sucks. And the BBC is the central journalistic institution of the country we live in. And since then, Laura, do you want to talk about what we've done since then in response?
Yeah, so the day that the article went live, we published, alongside Trans Activism UK, an open letter to the BBC, basically addressing a lot of the problems with the piece, focusing largely on the kind of things that the BBC will actually listen to as criticisms, because unfortunately that's how these things work, but pointing out the weak sample size of the survey, the issues with not contextualizing anti-trans hate groups, a lot of things like that.
Absolutely.
And, over the course of a few days, that racked up over 20,000 signatures. It was added with a cover letter and sent to the BBC. The current update is that we are waiting for a promised message back from Tim Davie at the top of the BBC.
Right.
We were told yesterday it's in the works, and I suspect it might now be a little delayed again. But yes, the BBC thus far have basically, in any public statements or in responses to people's complaints, just gone, nope, we worked on it a long time, and we didn't only have that very small survey, and we said some, so it's fine.
So we will be covering a little bit of the response from the mainstream press in a minute. But the most important thing for the coverage of today is that, as well as citing hate groups, citing fucking YouTubers who make their entire fucking platform off of anti-trans content,
and posting false flag stuff.
Right.
They included a gender critical campaign against gay people and blamed it on trans people.
So as well as all this, they also cited the case of one Lily Cade, a porn actor who does lesbian porn, who markets herself as Porn Valley's Gold Star lesbian, who refused to do a scene with a trans woman because she doesn't believe trans women are women, which again, like, really gets at the heart of what this article is actually about. The idea we're being pressured into sex is the idea that if lesbians accept that trans women are women, then necessarily sometimes some lesbians would want to have sex with some trans women, which is coercion, apparently. And so it's actually an argument against trans women being women dressed up as calling us rapists. So it's kind of a 2-in-1. It's a very cool article, very smart, very compact, really fits a lot in there.
Specifically on the content in the piece as well, Lily Cade is an odd inclusion in the piece in that, at least by the text of the piece, she does not make any claim that a trans woman tried to force her to have sex, which is the headline of the article. Yeah. The text of the piece, if we only take what is in the piece, says, a producer set me up for a scene. I found out the other person was going to be a trans woman. I said no.
Right.
There is no implication in the text of the piece that there was pressure to move ahead.
Correct.
So I understand that she reviewed photos of this person first and said yes originally, and then changed her mind on learning.
But Katie, they can always tell.
They can.
But they can always tell, though.
After interrogating someone, yeah.
Great. So, point being, that will be relevant. Next, moving on, we've got some of the response from the mainstream media. Here's Nick Robinson, respected journalist in the UK, who in 2017 tweeted, "Do not adjust your set. Normal service from the BBC means you will hear people you disagree with say things you don't like. That's our job." Which is just pathetic, really. What else can I say? And he updated it in response to this article specifically. That's what this quote tweet is about this article.
I feel like this is such a crappy cop-out that they always try and do. They're like, you might say things that, we might say things that you don't like. And it's like, that doesn't mean you'll uncritically publish hate speech. You're trying to say, oh, you didn't like it. Oh, everything has to pander to you. It's not that I didn't like it.
Right.
You post shit that I don't like all the fucking time.
Yeah, right.
It's particularly an issue because
you post stuff sucking off Rishi Sunak every day of the week, and I don't complain about it because I know it's going to go nowhere. And I know it's just your opinion, just an opinion I disagree with. But hate speech and monstering a minority to paint us all as rapists is not just an opinion I disagree with.
Say as much as you like that pineapple is the perfect pizza topping. I disagree with that, but I will not write an open letter about it.
Right.
There's a fucking difference.
Exactly. Kiln Girl Rose in chat says journalist is a social construct, and I think that's a very good point. I think we should really bring that to Nick Robinson. Yeah.
It's I always find that when people do this defense, it means that they can't defend the actual point they're making with the article. Because whenever anyone says to me, what you've said here is wrong, what you said here I disagree with, I never go to, well, I'm entitled to my opinion, or, well, sometimes I say things you don't like. I will defend it. This is the reason why I think this thing.
Right.
This is my evidence. This is my logic. This is how I can back it up.
Yeah.
But they don't do that. They say, here's a load of transphobic bullshit, and you're like, but this is factually wrong. This is clearly transphobic. And they're like, oh, what, just because you disagree? No.
It's been the most reassuring thing with the open letter is that I've yet to see any of the angry shouting people or the media responses or any of that to the open letter actually criticize any of the contents of the open letter. It's all, I'm allowed my opinion, grumble, progressives need to stop being bullies. Nothing is actually, here is what is wrong with your criticism.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we needed any confirmation, by the way, here's the reply tweet where he's actually saying, this is in reference to open letter signed by 16,000 calls for BBC apology over trans article. And it's just like, mate, do you not think that might be an indication that you fucked up? Maybe. Also, he's linking open letter signed by 16,000 calls for an apology.
Also, I don't know if we've noted, but the BBC News wrote an article about the open letter in which they don't address any of the points in it. All they do is go, well, at the time, 16,000 people have said it's bad, but we had some compliments.
Yeah.
They never take down your points whenever you do this.
Of course not.
This is a thing.
They're saying that one person did do a response who was Jane Claire Jones, if you know her, who's a gender critical.
Good.
And it's worth going and investigating her response because
is this mad. The gender crit who tried to point out a contradiction that was actually two gender crit quotes that contradicted each other? Yeah.
She circled 2 bits of the letter and were like, "This is a direct contradiction," and it was 2 bits where you were quoting the article.
Yeah. The only contradiction they found was their own content contradicted itself.
And also at the bottom, I mean, she completely lost it and started writing in all capitals, like, if you disagree with the trans cult, you have to repent, or something like that. It's like, mate, we just said you're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, like, this is a thing that they really prey on, is the idea that, like, disagreement is met with this bullying, this, like, you have to agree, you have to, and it's just like, we're just asking for basic fucking respect, just like the most basic human decency. I've had this with, like, a family member who had like a crying meltdown at me, telling me that, like, trans ideology is this monolith that you have to bow down before, and it was just like, all that we were talking about was using someone's correct name and pronouns, and it's just
it's like,
that's actually not an ideology you have to bow down before. That's, well, I mean, it is. You have to just be basically respectful of people, or you can not and just be a bellend. That's, those are the choices.
Like some people who I know have been, like, a trans woman I know who came out, like, before I was born, has been using the women's toilets for my entire life.
Right.
And now suddenly, since 2015, her doing that is trans ideology.
Right.
So at what point does going to the toilet become an ideology?
Yeah, right. Well, so exactly this. The article attracted both praise and criticism on social media, and that's in line with something that they said in the responses that they've given out. This very, just this absolutely rancid copy-paste response that they've given out to a bunch of the to the formal complaints people have sent in. It's like copy pasted. Everyone's like been mocking it all over Twitter. And one of the things they said near the end of that copy paste response was just like, we've received a lot of appreciations and complaints. I will consider all the feedback carefully. And I think someone in chat just before said the BBC would do something if they... Yeah, Boggle said the BBC would apologize if 6 people complained about someone not wearing a poppy. And that's true. Like,
Yeah.
But they've received a lot of appreciations for the article. It's just ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous.
It is worth pointing out, I think, that I actually think, well, according to maybe Graham Linehan's blog, which is total bullshit, they actually got more appreciations than they did official BBC complaints.
Oh.
And of course, I'm sure.
And I have heard that when I was talking to someone who I know in the BBC who knows these kinds of things earlier on in the day, when the amount of complaints was about 3,000, they had about 3,000 appreciations as well.
Right.
So it's possible. But if that's the case, I think it's worth highlighting how the gender criticals are very organised at this kind of thing. Yes. They're very good at writing letters.
I will note as
organised.
well that there are considerably more limitations and restrictions and obfuscation around the complaints process than there are compliments. It is very easy to write a sentence or considerably more. Write as much or little as you want. There is a lot less rigorousness around, like, it's a lot less of a stringent process than trying to follow the BBC's complaints procedure.
Absolutely. So more journalism here from John McManus. Actually, the tweet's been deleted, which I think is pathetic, cowardly scum move, because he's just trying to hide that he was doing it. But on the other hand, it shouldn't be out there. So, there's two sides to it. There's two sides to the story, and we should consider both. Anyway, he was comparing trans people to Jimmy Savile, famous pedophile. So that's cool. And then he had a bit of a back and forth with Owen Jones, and then very patronizingly replied to Owen Jones, "My colleagues should pursue any story for which there might be evidence or testimony." I suppose "might be" is the really operative phrase in that sentence, because there is no evidence, and it was the most evidence there was an 80 reply Twitter poll. So very cool.
So yes, but if we can imagine the evidence, we can use that to push policy.
If there might be evidence, this is a little like the WMDs, I feel. If there might be a trans woman in the bathroom, we can invade Afghanistan. So
Did you get the tweets people searched up of him talking about Jimmy Savile at the time?
I think there is a screenshot right here. Hey, John McManus, want to comment on the story of how you tried to cover up for Jimmy? So yeah, literally, just this guy absolutely wanting to suck Jimmy Savile's toes, like really trying his best to cover for him at the time when people were.
They're always like this. This is so gender critical men, you know. They claim to care about defending women and children and stuff when they're talking about trans people, and it's the only thing they say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then whenever you look up the history, they always have bullshit. Like every single fucking gender critical man has some disgusting thing in their past. All of them.
Yeah, there was another thing I found when I was looking for when I was looking for that Nick Robinson tweet, which was Nick Robinson asking, are trans rights a threat to women's safety? To his credit, he was talking with Paris Lees about it, but like even that framing is disgusting. On
On this little tweet there, if I can just do a sneaky aside. Sorry, I know I'm talking loads. I hope it's not annoying. So I replied to John McManus there saying like, you know, what the fuck off.
Yeah.
But more eloquently. And the Malcolm Clark of LGB Alliance, I'm not sure what his official position is.
Oh, very cool.
Founders or whatever. He came in and replied saying, basically, yeah, well, what about We Spa? And he had this quote of me where, like, days after,
Jesus,
he still thought that it was like potentially a complete fabrication of me saying that.
Right.
You know, now my position is I don't really know what happened. I know there's a lot of information flying about and misinformation, but anyway, and I asked him about this upcoming thing that we're going to talk about. Perhaps we should talk about this afterwards. I don't know, but it was such a good, a perfect example of them. Like, we're talking about. They were saying like, oh, is this like the Jimmy Savile thing? They're covering up sex abusers. And then this guy comes in trying to cover up my question about the sex abuser with something else.
Well, so that's the next part. That's the next thing. So we'll remember that we said that Lily Cade was one of the people who was cited as being a cis lesbian who was being pressured, although, as Laura pointed out, in the text of the article, doesn't actually say that. And anyway, so one of the cis women featured in the BBC's Are Some Trans Women Sexually Predatory piece is a serial rapist. So there's the screenshot from the article. There's everyone should hopefully be aware of the abuse and assaults Lily Cade has committed at this point. I've deleted all my videos with her and want nothing to do with her. Please stay safe and stay away from her. And then the reply is just full of people saying that she's assaulted them. One I find particularly interesting. I'm sorry, people, I already gave a very strong content warning. I'm sorry for going into kind of some grimmer things here, but one I find particularly interesting is ran into her at an MFC party in June. One, not sure why she was there. Two, she sat in a corner praying. Wait, this is the wrong one. Shit, no, I went with the wrong one. The one that I found particularly interesting. Yes, Lily Cade assaulted me at my very first X-Biz Awards in a bathroom stall directly after assaulting another girl in another bathroom stall. Lily Cade, you can't make this shit up. You can't make this shit up. The one they're citing as evidence of the problem is assaulting women in bathrooms. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, stranger than fiction. Like, you cannot come up with this stuff.
I mean, I hate pointing this stuff out, but it's just this projection thing. You know, when you end up with a QAnon support who've been railing against paedophiles turns out to be a paedophile, or the Republican who's trying to outlaw gay marriage.
For that matter, with QAnon, it's like their guy is Donald Trump, and obviously, you know. But I just think it's so much. It's so much.
Yeah. And this is something that, like, when we were first hammering home the open letter and the response to it, like, one of the big things we kept pointing out is the best possible reading of this for the BBC is incompetence, like sheer neglectful incompetence, because either they somehow in this, like, they boast about how many months, like over a year, what was it, like a year, 2 years that this was being worked on. somehow this never came up,
Right.
which is incompetence, and
Right.
it blows apart the BBC's claim
Right.
in their boilerplate
They
response.
have
that this was an
laughably low
incredibly-
editorial standards,
Yeah,
if that
they-
was the case.
Yeah, they're very lax argument that we've definitely highly researched this, or it is deliberate malice and covering up a known abuser because her identity not only does not fit the narrative they are trying to spin, but actively weakens it, because
Yep.
to acknowledge that Lily Cade is an abuser of cis lesbians
Yes.
very much points out that anyone can be an abuser of cis lesbians, and
Right.
that any number of anecdotal experiences
Right.
involving trans women should not be used to label all trans women. And you can't
Exactly.
make that argument
Yeah.
if you acknowledge that one of your cis lesbians in the piece
Yes. Yep.
has done the very thing.
And yeah, and then even then you would have
Highest
to
rated cis lesbian you could be, too.
right. It's like, and then as well the flimsiness of some trans women as the title of the article
Yes.
completely falls apart as well, because it's like well, that works two ways. It's either like some trans women, and then you're like, well, why is that news then? Unless you mean it's a pattern and it's a
Yeah.
problem with trans women. So that's the only two
This
ways
is-
you can take it. So if you're then, like, as Laura says, if you acknowledge that anyone could be doing this, then you're like, oh no, it is the first one, and it's just some cases have occurred with some trans women because trans women are human beings, and anyone could be an abuser, a predator, or whatever.
It's just so obviously this like attempt at plausible deniability. Like
Yeah.
you go around just the only sexual abuses you talk about are some trans women. I'm not saying all trans women, just some trans women. And
Right.
then you say, well, what about cis people? And what about? And they're like, no, you whatever. Do you not? Are you trying to silence me on this? I need to talk about some trans women. It's just so
Right.
obvious.
I exactly. Like I say, it's just like it's the threshold for it being news is one of the most important things. Is just like, why are you talking about this? Why is this in the fucking BBC? Why are they publishing this right now? And if it is just some trans women, then it's not news. Yeah.
Yeah. And to talk about this, best case, it's incompetence. I think, if we just took this one thing, one of their sources turns out to actually be the person doing the thing, that is possible on its own if you were to forget to Google them, to do no research at all, and you miss one or something. But the fact that this is alongside platforming like an explicitly anti-trans group, the Get the L Out, which are the group are signed the WHRC declaration calling for like the total removal of almost all trans rights.
Yeah.
To miss that out and to screenshot a tweet and crop out what it's replying to, when what it's replying to is a gender critical false flag operation, and it says that everywhere in the comments.
Yeah.
Like everyone is saying this is false flag, and for them to not mention that either, like I just do not believe that it's
While we're still on responses to the article, and because this something we were saying reminded me of this, there's something I saw earlier today which I thought was funny. Just one of these smaller popping up like gender critical accounts replying to Owen Jones when he was arguing with John McManus and saying, "You're throwing gay men under the bus to defend straight males pretending to be women and lesbians," and it was this tweet replying to John McManus where Owen had said, "Hi John, do you think the BBC should do an article about how straight people are being pressured into sex by some gay people? Last year, a gay man who was jailed for raping dozens of straight men, after all. If you don't think there should be such an article, why not?" And just the basic lack of reading comprehension among gender criticals. But then again, it's not the point, is it? The point is just to throw anything at the wall and overwhelmed by numbers. And that's, again, this is an important point to the chat. Like, this is what they're doing on purpose. This is why there are, maybe more appreciations than complaints, and this is why we have to get people to write complaints. Although, 16,000 signatures on the open letter should count for something. Yeah. And well, I'm just saying, like, that's what they acknowledge themselves, and then to say that there are more appreciations is just like, well, more like that many people signed this letter. But so it's important to acknowledge that, that they organize to letter writing campaigns is their big thing, as it has been for conservative organizers for the last 100 years, basically. Literally since the 1920s, conservative organizers have been getting together to write letters en masse. Right, notable examples like Phyllis Schlafly in the US and the anti-abortion campaigning and the moral majority and all this stuff. Letter writing campaigns are their really, really big thing. We have to counter that by numbers.
Yeah. I will also note that while I don't have specific numbers, my understanding from people within the BBC I've been speaking to is that there was a very big influx of complaints specifically on Friday. Which, a big part of that was as the week ended and more quotes from the BBC were basically saying, oh, we've done nothing wrong. It seemingly did galvanize a lot of people to do formal complaints.
Right. Well, I hope that what we're about to cover, will also galvanize more people to write complaints. So
there's still time for people watching now.
Yeah.
Write a complaint.
Absolutely.
Write a complaint, and then they send you the boilerplate response. Escalate.
Yeah.
You can do so within 30 days of the publication of the article, and I believe it's 3 times you will need to escalate before they offer to push you to Ofcom, at which point my understanding is that Ofcom are very, very eager to see complaints escalated up, because if you do it through the BBC first, that demonstrates to Ofcom that the BBC has had an opportunity to address the complaints and has not done so, at which point Ofcom can really step in.
Right.
Yeah. And I've heard that from contacts too.
Yes.
Yes.
Same.
So, getting on to the main thing of what we're here to talk about. Oh my goodness, my sticky notes just opened. Oh no. Okay. The main thing of what we're here to talk about today is that Lily Cade, there was a post on Lily Cade's website, lilycade.com, which is just a horrific manifesto that reads like a fucking mass shooter or fucking serial killer. It fully says, and again, content warning for this part, we'll be reading a few excerpts here, but I just, so content warning again. If you left it up to me, I'd execute every last one of them personally. The next part, she says, the next part is her just calling for the lynching of trans public figures. Caitlyn Jenner, the Wachowski sisters, Laurel Hubbard, Fallon Fox. It's unhinged. It's terrifying. She repeatedly calls us all pedophiles. I've got more here where Katie highlighted a few things here. If the Arabs did 3% of what the trans women have done to your people, you would bomb them into the Stone Age. A real shock that a TERF is also a racist. I've never seen that one before. I respect one trans man, Buck Angel.
It is. So it is.
It's like this. That's like the center square on the bingo board, I feel.
Yeah.
Buck loves Buck Angel.
Can I chime in with something here that has happened literally while we've been live?
Is it the thread that you sent me?
Yes. So
right, I'll open this up on here then.
Yeah. So I want to very quickly bring up that someone who works at WordPress, and I can verify is a WordPress employee, I've done stuff involving them before, I know them personally, has started doing a thread talking about some of the evidence that exists that this post is real and was posted by Lily Cade and is not a fabrication or something that has been maliciously posted to that site. Now, I will talk about what is explicitly in this thread currently. I don't know if more is being added to the thread over time.
Okay.
Let me just find the information.
Read through it, or are you just gonna?
I'm going to read through the bits that are specifically of interest here. I'm just trying to find the right bits.
Okay.
Sorry, who's this from?
Yes, the Tallulah on Twitter.
I'll put it in the chat.
First up, its dates. The post date is the same as the modified date. This was most likely pasted, written, and published in one action with no revisions. The author of this post, user ID 2, looks like it's just her and her web dev. Doesn't need to exactly take a detective to surmise who wrote this. We can even detective it nonetheless. Querying
unless she has a web dev who should be arrested immediately.
Yes. Yes, we can detective it nonetheless. Querying older posts, or just a whole bunch of them, shows that the user posting all of the blog post, from the basic bitch porn hype ones to the Turv and outrage, has consistently been user ID 2.
Cool.
There is some more stuff that it seems like it's going to dig into some Gravatar-based evidence that is currently not part of the thread, but
Sure.
yes, having been speaking to Tallulah, there is evidence that the poster of this post is consistently the person who has been posting.
Yeah. The person who was
things on this
interviewed
site.
for the article for the BBC. The person who was
Yes.
quoted by the BBC in that article. Is
So she
Indeed.
has done 3 or 4 blog posts since the BBC article, and one of them is saying, "I just did this BBC article, and like I hate trans women," basically, and it's got some of the energy of the 2 that came out today, just slightly more mild.
Yes. Just from public things, the whois data for this website has not changed between when this domain was listed as an email address in an apology to do with the abuse, and today. So there is public whois data that says the website hasn't stopped being owned and someone new purchased it. And someone at WordPress is saying the same user ID in the WordPress backend posted the old things and the new things.
Yeah. So
and that is fairly convincing evidence that this is a
Also,
legitimate post.
We're pointing out that she's posted on what appears to be her Twitter, which has been posting for ages, and has posted direct quotes from it, linked to it, tagged the BBC into it.
Right. So this is and that's the thing. Like, if someone is posting this stuff, which is trans women are the weakest, vilest, most pathetic earth on men, too weak to even kill themselves rather than control the horrifying shadow monster they are grooming your children to serve, like proper QAnon conspiracy theory shit. Like, I put this quote in the Discord earlier. The shape of power is a pedophile cult. The pedophiles at the center do it to bathe in the blood of virgins, but the foot soldiers are cretins in it for the bootlicking, who probably do believe whatever stupid lies the alpha pedophiles tell them, but would also believe anything at all as long as they get to lick the boots of viler monsters than themselves. The shape is always the same. The foot soldiers of these pedophiles often speak Newspeak as their native language. This is properly QAnon shit, and if someone's posting this stuff and tagging in the BBC, I think that the BBC has like a pretty basic obligation, responsibility to truth, to journalism, to even just public safety and decency, to take down the article that they've
or at
quoted,
least revise it
at the very least, but
take her quote out, mention that they got it wrong and that she's actually
but then if you've got 16,000 or 20,000 now signatures on an open letter calling for an apology, you maybe just take that article down and apologize. This is another one as well. Like, the Christians were right. Gay marriage was the fall of Rome. I've seen this before personally, so this part isn't surprising to me. I was saying this on Twitter earlier. Like, the part that's upsetting to me is that this person was quoted in the BBC. It's not surprising to me that TERF lesbians become homophobes. I've seen this before where they fully, there is a side of the gender critical cult which is fully in with QAnon, and those people fall into like Christian dominionism, like the idea that biblical law should be the thing ruling the earth, and I've seen from those people posting just like, I know that as a homosexual I'm a sinner and I'm going to hell, like just posting that kind of stuff. Or like, I've even seen them saying stuff like, I know that as a homosexual I'm mentally ill, this kind of stuff. This part isn't surprising to me, sadly, but like the fact that she's quoted in the BBC is like a big deal.
So there's another point that I think's worth highlighting. Just again, stepping back and looking at the context here, this of allegedly trans women pressuring people or doing sex crimes or whatever, and the fact that she is someone who's done that herself. Just again, in one of her blog posts today, she explicitly calls for the gang rape and murder of Jazz Jennings' mum.
So I've got this. So I've got this on screen here. I'm just very sorry for everyone for this, but It says, hang this bitch, gang rape this bitch before you hang her. How dare she sacrifice her own child to the cult for fame? Scum-sucking, dog-cum guzzling, shit-eating, lower than a worm hellfire monster of a woman. How could you put this on TV? Why haven't you killed these people? There are pleas to like the army, to the cops, to the Marines. Like it is when we say it's like when we say it's like QAnon stuff, like it is truly advocating for any man who is violent enough and is bigoted enough. Please go out and kill. Just kill. Like it is. And for those who don't know, the Day of the Rope is a kind of fascist. Millennialist millennialist conspiracy prediction of like an end times kind of judgment thing. A lot of the time when it crosses over with Christian dominionism, like it's the literal rapture, and like once they cleanse all of the world by killing all the minorities, then they'll all be good. But you know, a lot. Well. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of biblical language in this, but like then a lot of the time it's non-religious, and it's just a belief that like they will just hang all the minorities. With a particular focus on queer people. Very cool posting from Lily Cade.
BBC expert.
Did we already quote the part where she repeats the great replacement thing?
No. Do you want to...
There's a couple of great replacement bits.
Do you want to
Behold, the great replacement. It's already here. Not China,
1 second.
Not Arabs.
Tia, is this in Dead Whores Tell No...
Lies, yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to quickly...
I think I've linked that one on my...
Great replacement. Okay.
It's in...
Yeah, you want to go ahead and read that. Go ahead, Tia.
Behold, the great replacement. It's already here. Not China, not the Arabs, trannies.
Mm-hmm. The Matrix, smartphones, any generation of American men before this would rip the still beating hearts from every last shadow monster for this, wouldn't they? And beat every last smartphone to bits and hang the lords of the algorithm in public because they were not addicted to digital masturbation. She's a porn actor. What's happening?
I haven't done this in as much depth as I would like, but there is a weird change in tone if you look at her historical posts through to the present.
Right.
Some notable differences are that before a lengthy hiatus from this blog, she referred to trans women as women.
Yep.
And she stopped doing so when she returned.
Right.
The tone changed towards what appears to be conservative Christian belief comes around then, and I don't know what to make of that other than It seems like the two coincided.
Yes,
Yeah.
There was... Yeah, it's very... Like, this would be pure speculation, so for the record, this is not my, like... Oh, shit, sorry, something started playing. This is not what I'm saying is the case, but I would say that this would be in line with, like, the cult-like behavior of TERFs and of the gender-critical feminist movement, that, like, people keep on getting, like, they're absent, and then they come back, and then everything they say is unhinged. And I think that a lot of people, honestly, at this point, are just familiar with that in their personal lives from people, from like relatives who fall in the QAnon hole. Yeah,
and it matches up timeline-wise. Like this, she wrote this thing saying trans women are women in 2015, which is like just when gender critical was getting big.
Yeah.
And there is more about that post actually. And then now in 2021, a few years later.
Yeah. So this article is no longer here. Speaking of things you can't say, like you can't even say you're English. Speaking of stuff that you can't say, there was an article interviewing Bo Dias, talking about what the article was called "Gender Critical is a Cult," and was detailing the experiences of someone who was fully inside the gender critical feminist world, and was talking about stories of horrific abuse and being flown around all over the place, and being asked to speak as an example of a lesbian who was fully against the transgenders, and how they escaped that, and recognized that it was cult programming. The article is no longer up because it mentioned Julie Bindel, and Julie Bindel scandal, sued Pink News to have it taken down. So there's the article that's all I can really put on screen, is that was taken down. But when I'm talking about this being, cult shit, like, yeah, fucking it is. Yeah.
It's pretty depressing. I think that it's worth pointing out, from what I gather, she did this article in 2015 saying, I think trans women are women and I'm not a transphobe and stuff, in response to allegations of being called a transphobe. And I think that a lot of gender critical people, like famously Graham Linehan, did this spiral where someone calls them a transphobe and they're like, no, I'm not a transphobe. And then they kind of just double down on one little thing. And then rather than just readdress that position, they end up spiraling into like madness.
Right.
And I think it's worth... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think it's worth sort of highlighting that I think this was around this term, this like major part of gender critical as a conspiracy theory of cotton sealing.
Yes.
Which, if you ask a gender critical what cotton sealing is, they will say, this BBC article, they would say, hordes of trans women are going around pressuring cis women into sex. That's what cotton sealing is to them.
Yeah.
But it originally started around in porn. And I think it may have even been around Lily Cade, though I'm not sure, and I didn't get time to read up on the background enough.
I believe that is the case.
Yeah, I think that's the case, and it was a situation where she would perform with all other different porn actors, and then there was this is a situation I think the article and the BBC is talking about, referring to, where there was a trans woman who she okayed when she saw them, and then when she met them in real life found out they were trans and turned them down. And the key thing here is the trans person didn't say, this is ridiculous, you need to have sex with me. She commented on the way in which it was done, treating her as a sex object.
Can I just...
And how she was...
Yeah,
sorry, go.
Well, I just wanted to quote from the article, because there was a specific thing about the way they talk about it in the article, which is interesting to me, and I commented on at the time when I read through it the other day, which is that the framing in the article is as if, because the article wants to frame trans women as incel-like rapists, the framing in the article... That's a lovely cat, Katie. The framing in the article is that cotton sealing is a term that trans people just throw around all the time and all know. So it says here, like, as a sentence, breaking the cotton sealing means being able to have sex with a woman. Which is just, like...
So...
What?
This is a clearly gender critical conspiracy, because this is one of those things where if you talk to a random trans person on the street, guarantee they will have not heard of cotton sealing. And
I was reading the article and I got to this part of it and I said, I've never heard that term in my life. I've heard it a dozen times in the last week, but that's the first time.
The reason I had heard it is from going into gender critical space and arguing with them, and they're like, why are trans people always going on about cotton sealing? And I'm like, what? And then you research it. Yeah. And
I've never once seen it ever break out of those circles and actually get used in... I've never seen a trans person use it. I've only ever seen the gender crits talk about it.
There was one seminar, like a trans woman giving a talk to a room of 20 people, called like the cotton sealing or something, as well as the person who coined the term. In 2015 or whenever this all happened. That the gender critical people talk as if it was some major event that like changed the shape of trans activism or whatever, and it's similar to like their other conspiracy about Martine Rothblatt. I won't go off down to that, but the
brief version of the tangent is that Martine Rothblatt is a Jewish trans woman, right? And it's just where it links up, where turf shit links up with fully anti-Semitic, unhinged, like George Soros stuff gets mentioned a lot there.
Again, pointing to this one tiny event, like, oh, Martine Rothblatt wrote a book in 2009, or, oh, this lady held a conference with 30 people in 2015. And for some reason, for them, that's huge. And for obviously every single trans person under the sun, apart from the 30 who attended, they have no idea what this is. But then, and that's another damning thing about the article, is that if this journalist had done any research at all, they would have, and done their balance and stuff, they would have talked to trans people and said, "Tell me about the cotton ceiling."
Right.
And every single trans person they talked to would have been like, "What's that?"
Right. But instead, a consistent thing throughout that BBC article is every progressive trans person that Caroline Lowbridge reached out to speak to avoided her like the fucking plague. And I will, invite you to draw your own conclusions from that as to why that was. And the two trans people that she was able to speak to are both notoriously anti-trans, like two people who just make their bread and butter entirely on...
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting for anyone from the outside who isn't aware of this, specifically, the Debbie Hatton stuff in there, completely zero evidence, as, we should really hammer home. The piece acknowledges there is zero evidence for her claims that trans women are all men and are all straight and that's what's going on. Debbie Hatton has a sorry, yes.
It's not just that there isn't zero evidence. There is evidence, lots of evidence against what she did. So she made the claim that most trans women are lesbians because they're just males and males are... But that's false. We've done, and she said there's not much evidence, but we've done loads of studies on trans people's sexuality.
Right.
There is lots of evidence actively against what she said, and none of that is brought up because it is a trans woman who was willing to say what the piece said, because Debbie Hatton will say whatever gender crits want her to say because they'll come for her last, is the feeling I get. It's the come for me last, I'll say what you want me to say.
Yeah. Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I could keep ranting about this forever.
One of the things in the article is this, let's say 99.98% of the article is just completely groundless and the rest of them are conjunctions. But most of my family were military, and most men were military for most of the time, but this is factually inaccurate to
This is
in the manifesto. I'm still working my way through it because it is incredibly fucked up.
Yeah, it is. It's ridiculous. It's yeah.
I'll overstate how fucked up it is.
This is Manifest Destiny's endgame ? As though Manifest Destiny is a good fucking thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know what additional commentary to add when I'm looking at something that says, if you left it up to me, I'd execute every last one of them personally. You can't. I don't. It's there's no ambiguity in what her end game is. What her goal is there. She's laying it out very clearly that she is a genocidal bigot, and
and I think it's sorry.
I wanna take a second while I remember to do so to highlight something timeline-wise about all of what's happened with this blog. We point out that in around 2014 was when there was some criticism of perhaps, hey, it's weird that you were okay with doing that scene, and then you having seen the body, then you found out they were trans and you weren't. That sounds maybe like transphobia might be going on, and then posting stops, and the return is obviously very, very heavily anti-trans. And while that is a thing, I want to talk separately. I'm not saying this is what happened with Lily Cade, but I want to talk about a phenomenon that is a very observable thing that happens, which is, we briefly touched on, when people get criticized for being transphobic, the pipeline that tends to bring them into gender criticism is they are being criticized by a group of people, and gender crits open their arms and go, hey, we don't think you did anything wrong. Come hang out with us for a while.
Right.
And that will involve immersing love bombing them is the term.
Yes.
It's hey, we will give you a lot of love until you did nothing wrong and give you an option to not have to deal with guilt.
Yeah.
In order to keep you around and listening to rhetoric that might be more conservative, which I'm not saying this is the case, but it could explain the the conservative shift that happened during that gap.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
you can
it's-
see this pretty
yeah.
like clearly with people like public personalities like Ariel Scarcella, who starts being a transphobe, and then like the next thing is she's like, all these triggered lefties are so sensitive, and I have a good time hanging out with MAGA guys, and they're actually really cool, and they're chill, and they never criticize me. Yeah, and it's this.
J.K. Rowling actually wrote that in her like essay, her main like turf wars essay. She
Yeah.
mentioned about how she said something or she liked something and then she got criticism for it, and that caused her to go on, go down the rabbit hole.
Right.
Like we do acknowledge it, and I've made a lot of effort to be friends with gender critical people and like listen to their side and all this kind of stuff. And I've watched people go from moderates to extremists over a course of months,
Right.
several times, and it's very depressing to watch. And they come out with this stuff. Often they'll say, well, we need to listen to these people's stories, and I just want to believe all sides and stuff. But they also start saying these things of, like, they'll start saying it to each other, like, trans people will never accept you. You can never be good enough for them.
Yeah.
They'll always criticize you, so you might as well not bother listening to their criticism at all.
Right.
And I think that's an important part, as well as the
Which
love
is like
bombing.
if people remember, that's like the NPC narrative that we had in like 2017 and 18 from the alt-right, where they started insisting that like, just in order to desensitize their people to any non-fascist media or takes or people, they started saying like these people are just NPCs. They're not real. They're not really thinking anything. They're just repeating the things they've been programmed to think. And yeah, I mean, frankly, it's basically why a lot of fascists love the metaphor of the red pill. Like, they're the ones who've woken up, and everyone else is just following a script, right?
I've just realised I've been on the wrong mic the whole time. I'm really sorry.
Oh,
I couldn't tell. It's all fine.
Okay, good. So just going to say on the red pill, interestingly, she goes on about the Matrix a lot.
Yes,
She did a blog post about,
yes.
like, I can't remember what it's called, the Matrix or the red pill.
I think
or
it's
something.
called the red
And
pill
then-
from looking on her site before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then both of the ones that she posted today mention the Matrix, mention the Wachowskis, mention like smartphones and being plugged into the Matrix and taking the like. There's a lot of references to this, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's really bizarre because, well, I mean, it's not bizarre. I think it's another indication that she is absolutely like in this in this pipeline or in this world or whatever kind of phrasing you want to use. Personally, I prefer the phrasing of the cultic milieu, which is like language from academic research of conspiracy theorist and conspiracist belief. Like it's kind of this idea of this shroud that people exist within, and they kind of move between different conspiracy theories. But sometimes they kind of collect all of them at once and wind up believing basically all of them, which is what you see happening with QAnon, where it's exactly. Exactly. And so that's what I think. Yeah, whatever phrasing you want to use, but I think it's more evidence that she's in that kind of world, that she'd be posting about the red pill. And I mean, she kind of, what's infuriating is that I think both in the red pill thing and in this fucking school shooters manifesto here, she says that like the Wachowskis were trying to warn people about the Matrix but got sucked into it, which is just like, I mean, not to go off on the thing I would rant about for hours and hours, but like for those who don't know already, like the Matrix is, largely trans allegory, and both the Wachowski sisters came out since its creation as trans, and it's all just maps on completely into like an ideological understanding of gender and society. And no, they didn't like accidentally fall into the Matrix. Ooh, how ironic. It's that your perspective is fucked and completely inverted to reality, obviously. I think that one counts as Occam's razor, don't you? Like, that's just like, did this person who wrote the thing I'm referencing ironically stumble ass backwards into the thing itself? Or am I a massive fascist dumbass? Like, I think one of these is a simpler explanation. Like,
all of, I feel like all of gender critical, or like the mainstream strands of it, are really like Occam's razor. I mean, it's the one explanation is like some people are born trans and some people are born gay, or your sexuality and your gender identity is something that's largely something that's programmed into you and it develops over time and nature and nurture, whatever.
Right.
Or
Right.
there's some paedophile cult of men who want to pretend to be women because they hate women, and then they get the genitals cut off, and then they want to inject children with hormones so that they can then take over the world with a transhuman. Like,
yeah.
Come on.
It's so
what's more beautiful?
It's so bizarre as well because like I remember a lot of interactions that you'll have with gender crits that will be them trying to interrogate stuff, and like a lot of the kind of deliberately facetious questions that they're asking, which are trying to back up their own already conspiracy theory, will be things like, why don't trans people date each other if they're, and you're like, well, they do all the time. What are you talking about? So I mean, Laura's on the call right now as a trans woman married to a trans woman, and that
is by far the most infuriating.
It's an infuriating one for sure. But that and then the next question in this little back and forth will be like, it winds up at like about sexuality changing and how transition is actually just conversion therapy, and it's like. The thing I was going to say was it's like you can wind up with questions like that where the really simple answer, when someone's sexuality does change and shift, it's like, well, you're changing from presenting as one gender to presenting as a different gender and having a completely different social experience. Is it so shocking that your sexuality might shift around during that time? No, it's completely...
There is nothing surprising about the idea that as your gender presentation changes, you might be treated differently by people across the gender spectrum, and that might change your experiences of people with various genders and your feelings and attractions as a result.
Yeah, and I don't want to...
Sorry.
Well, I was going to try and give the mic to Tia because I feel like she hasn't gotten to talk much, but I just wanted to say the point I was trying to make was that, like, Occam's razor again, like, so many of these questions, the answer is just, because they're transitioning, you dumbass. Like, it's all one simple answer for everything compared to this huge George Soros thing. But I'm sorry, Tia, what were you saying?
I finally finished the article and I have an opinion on the whole ding-dang thing. It is...
Okay.
It is a uniquely American attempt at accelerationism to push right-wing people toward militias, which are going to do the sort of it could happen here militia.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, that's completely true, and that's another reason why it's especially unhinged from a British perspective, because so much of this is literally like, we should just get the guns and kill everyone. And it's like, mate, what guns? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Literally. Like, yeah.
But it is scary for the Americans because,
of course, I mean, that's their whole country up and down.
Yeah, and transphobia is one of the biggest recruiters to the far right at the moment. It's one of their big things. And we've already seen, like, with the Wispa incident, where, off the original claim, when there was no evidence at all either way, the Proud Boys turned up and stabbed a load of people, including a gender-critical woman. That this happens. This is scary.
Yeah,
especially when it's platformed by like one of the most prestigious organizations in the entire world.
Yeah. Right. I think so. I was mostly just trying to create. We'll be going for an hour now. I was mostly just trying to create some coverage so that people could share something and see some people talking about this. And I think we've successfully done that. Marina, you've not gotten to say a word the whole time. Do you have some thoughts before we go?
I just think, I maybe should have said this earlier when we were talking about, the BBC not doing its due diligence and looking this woman up, but it's just so baffling to me that it's not like she's an alleged rapist, she's a self-admitted rapist.
Right,
like
she's admitted it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think this isn't up for debate. So to just platform someone like this who is clearly sick, and is now going on this complete like teenage boy manifesto spree.
It's like they've handed her the mic, and then this is what she's producing, which is unsurprising if you'd looked at her beforehand for a second, right?
Right.
I mean, it really suggests that they were reaching. If she was the best example they could...
this is what they have.
If the best example they could cite to fill this piece out was someone who doesn't in the piece make any allegation of the thing the headline is about, and who has a known history of admitting to abuse, and seemingly has other bigger skeletons in their closet.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
I think okay, so I'll ask for people's final comments and then maybe like plug what you have to plug and then we'll head off. My final thought on this would be something I said at the trans rights protest in August, which is that the media has a serious problem in this country and has done for decades. If you want to see that speech, it's up on my YouTube channel. But I would say thank you. But if I would say that if there are journalists who are interested in the truth, this should be an enormous story. The BBC platform's a genocidal, fascist, unhinged fucking weirdo, right? Who is an admitted, as Marina said, an admitted rapist who is saying all this, calling for public lynchings on top of everything else wrong with that article, on top of an open letter being written to it, to the BBC, having 20,000 signatures, on top of all this stuff, right? Channel 4, ITV, Sky, all the papers should be all over this because this is monumental. Americans watching this might not have a full appreciation for, on the size of our little wet rock covered in racist barbarians, how big a fucking story this should be for what it is. And so I say to, if there are any journalists who might see this, what are you doing? This should be everywhere. And if you don't think you have any power to say this, if you think if you're like, Sophie, that's all good and well, but I can't do that because I have an editor and they approve what stories go out, I say to you, like, you and other people around you can see how wrong this is, which means that you can organize a walkout, a protest, you can write things independently, and you can change the industry with collectivized action. There are journalists' unions in the UK, and you can actually change this stuff. So again, just to any journalists who might be seeing this, you can change something. So Marina, again, I'm sorry for cutting you off before. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, basically just going to reiterate what I believe Tears said, is that this is obviously something that's that this woman wrote because she feels empowered by the BBC article, but this is a very bad warning sign because she is talking to the kinds of people that live in America that do actually, get up every weekend and go practice their militia runs. So I just think that we should meet her where she wants us to meet her, but that's a conversation for later.
Tia.
Join an SRA.
I endorse this. Tia, do you have final thoughts on this?
Furthermore, ice must be destroyed. Follow me on Twitter at pamphlet_2.
Laura, do you have final thoughts on the article?
Yeah. I'm helping put together a protest outside the BBC's broadcasting house on January 8th of next year. Yeah. And I had a lot of people, when talking about the fact that me and Trans Activism UK were doing it then, ask, why are you doing it then? Why are you not doing it now? And the simple answer, and I think that this is where I feel about this, is that I think the BBC's problem with transphobia is bigger than this one article.
Yes.
There's been a lot of energy. There's been a lot of energy this week and over this weekend of people doing things this instant right now because of this one piece, and I'm glad that we see that, and I'm glad that pressure's there. But this is not one article, and it's not just the BBC, because the BBC have had a pattern for years running up to this of platforming anti-trans voices without context, quoting groups like LGB Alliance rather than quoting groups like Stonewall, for example. There has been a years-long journey that trans people have been trying to tell allies about, and they have not paid attention until today. And I genuinely do not believe that, like, this Lily Cade thing, I think it's going to blow up. I hope it will. But even if it does, I don't think that's going to fix this problem straight away, because you still have the fundamental problem of this morning, the Times wrote a piece about how the BBC must not cave to progressives and how terrible it is to see progressives bullying the BBC out of their journalism. You've seen The Guardian. Like, every major media outlet in the UK not only failed to criticize the BBC over this, but in many cases actively backed them up and said, don't give in. And this is a bigger problem than this one piece. It's a bigger problem than this one outlet.
That's right.
And that's why I have protests planned for next year. Because I do not believe that this is going to get fixed right now. We need to not let this energy die, and we need to keep that pressure up against the BBC, against every outlet, against every attempt that isn't as blatant as this, because every one of them does matter. Even if they're not this cut and dry, they still matter.
Absolutely. Katie, final thoughts on the thing, and then we'll go around and plug stuff.
Yeah, sorry, I promise I won't rant off. I guess, have
go
one
for it.
Final point, and this is kind of thing that I spend most of my time doing with this. What would it look like if this problem that they're proposing that exists did actually exist? Like, am I just having a problem with someone else raising a real problem? And I'd say no, because that would look very different. If imagine that trans women are pressuring lesbians into sex or something. If that was the case, you'd be able to write an article on it that doesn't hide the motivations of the groups involved, that doesn't have to platform a rapist, that doesn't have to, lie, have a data source of only 80 people. If this was a real issue, you would be able to write a real article, and you wouldn't have to say some trans women pressuring lesbians into sex as the headline. You could present the full context. You could say, did you know that actually domestic violence in lesbian relationships is actually very high, and that's an issue that we haven't dealt with BBC at all before. Also, did you know that this anti-trans group which is saying this have signed the WHRDC declaration? Like, if this was a real problem, you wouldn't have had to write this laser-focused bad faith article. You could have provided all the context, and if I was to I could rewrite this article with all the information they've got and added all the proper context to it and publish it and be like kind of happy with it, but all the transphobes would hate it, because just reading an article, you would see that it was garbage. If you just kept all the facts they do have and just added the context alone debunks this article without even having to delve in. And I think it's important whenever, they're coming back with their little, you just don't, you want to silence people, you don't want to hear the truth. That's not even the biggest problem. So it's just nonsense. And to add quickly to what Laura said, it's not just that this is the tip of the iceberg. I still think it's going to get worse. I don't think it will be the worst BBC article we see, and I definitely don't think this will be the worst UK.
Hey, they've only called us rapists so far. They haven't yet called us paedophiles in the BBC.
So far they're still caveating it with some.
It's
gonna get worse.
Right.
So organise, join Laura's protest.
I'll be there at the protest.
I also want to add, outside of the one that me and Trans Activism UK are organising outside Broadcasting House, if that is a difficult location for you to get to, other groups that we are not affiliated with are organising protests outside BBC buildings in other towns around the UK.
Absolutely.
You can do a Google search and find out about those. I can't advocate for what will occur, but there are other ones happening, and you should look into those as well.
Absolutely. It's a weird thing to say, but if you've enjoyed this stream, consider subscribing and cheering to support the channel. Nat and I, my girlfriend, will be playing some Resident Evil 6 after this. We're playing the Jake playthrough. I hate that boy. But yeah, if you want to come check that out, that's that. And if you want to check out the rest of the stuff I do, it's at patreon.com/curiovids. But what I really want to know is, where's the stuff that Marina does? That's the question on everyone's lips.
What Marina does is on Twitter at MarinaXDev, or on YouTube at MarinaDev. That's where I'm at. Sorry for not talking. I was just like, go off, Queens. I'm just here to be the support, the emotional support himbo. Just like,
I get it. It was good. But what about the not seen but also rarely heard Tia? What's up there?
I am on Twitter and on YouTube, and I'm putting out a video actually on transphobia in the next week or so. So
fab. What's your YouTube channel so people can look you up?
The word pamphleteer.
Okay.
I'm the green one.
Okay, and Laura.
I'm at Laura K Buzz everywhere. Laura K Buzz on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Patreon. That's the one that pays the bills. Amazingly, all the activism stuff doesn't pay the bills. If you want to support that stuff, I do
yeah.
Patreon.com/Laura K Buzz would really help, because this takes time.
I've heard being trans is so lucrative, people are even pretending to be trans for money, and yet my check from George Soros has not come through. Laura, sorry, Katie, has your check from George Soros come through?
Yeah, I didn't want to tell you guys.
Oh, damn, shit. Oh. If people want to give you extra money anyway...
Well, it's because I'm pivoting to being a full-time gender critical activist tomorrow. So
I see.
I'm going to do a 100k crowdfunder and then sue someone and then pull out at the start with a settlement and then walk away with the money and buy a mattress.
Sounds pretty good. Where can people find your stuff?
If you type Katie Montgomery into Google, you scroll past the hate websites and you go to the Twitter or YouTube.
Nice. Thank you all for joining this thing. Like I said, Nat and I will be back with some Resident Evil 6 shortly. Send this to journalists and tell them that if they can't write an article about this situation because of their editor not letting them, they should grow a spine, join a union, and organize their workplace to protest this genocidal bigotry in the UK. Cool. Yeah?
Oh, last thing I will very quickly throw in is if you want to be able to link to anything and be able to go, here is thing from Open Letter People about tonight's happenings, keep an eye on @transactivismuk on Twitter, where when we formally address all of this, that'll end up there.
Fantastic. See you, everyone. Bye.